a lot of people are going towards deregulation at this point,
Yeah.
and they're thinking that's going to be better for our economy, better for the average person. Where do you think that deregulation could actually hurt people?
I mean, I'm a big deregulation guy, so I would try to deregulate as much as possible. We were talking right before we started. I mean, both of us left LA. Like LA, to do anything, to start a new business or build a studio in your home or literally do landscaping outside of your house or anything, there's an obscene amount of regulations and rules and all these things that you have to pay and all of this stuff. So where could deregulation hurt as it pertains to tech specifically?
Or just the average person? Maybe for any industry, like what do you think is going to get impacted by that the worst?
I'm not really worried. Like, will there be something down the pike that they'll figure? I don't know. If you had no building codes, I think there's probably ways you could privatize a lot of that stuff, or at least make it a little more local focused than federally focused. I'm actually not worried about that at all. Like, I'm sure there is something, right? There clearly they will do something and there will be unintended consequences. I think it's all a risk worth taking right now. Like, to me, if you just deleted, as Vivek said, if you just deleted the Department of Education tomorrow, we'll see what happens on the other side. And I actually think it's going to be a hell of a... Well,
just put it
you
back.
can just, yeah, I mean, you can, because it's a giant building and those people will need jobs. But you know what? It's not going to be. That's the thing. That's the thing. None of these agencies are doing what they set out to do. The EPA was basically set out to kind of keep an eye on companies that were dumping sewage into the water. But it basically became a law writing agency. So these things have become way too big. They have way too much power. And I think if you eliminated virtually all of them, I mean, their goal is to eliminate about 300 of them. But if you eliminated virtually all of them, then what would happen? Well, most policies would be kicked back to the states, which is exactly what the founders intended. And I think that for the most part, I live in Miami. I want most of the things that I have to deal with in my life to be dealt with in Miami. And then from there, Florida. And then the stuff that we all have to deal with, say the border, that should be dealt with the federal government. But the less agencies and middlemen, I mean, this is what Trump, he started the thing about the deep state 8 years ago, and nobody really talked about that. We didn't really realize, boy, there is this thing in DC that just exists. It just exists, this middle management, bureaucratic nonsense. And finally, people are seeing it. So I think, I'm telling you, they're going to do a lot. It is going to be like Malay in Argentina, and it's going to happen very quickly.
What do you think the role of the government should be?
Not much. Not much. I would say the founders basically got it completely right, that everything should be dealt with at the state and local level, and then the federal government should have a couple things that they're supposed to do. So that would be border, make sure the states aren't warring with each other, interstate commerce, couple things like that, foreign policy, which back then was way less of a big issue as it is now. The government shouldn't do much. And especially as technology innovates and as AI comes around, there's just going to be more and more ability for you to live the way you want without governmental interference. What does the government do particularly well? Not much. And I say that as someone that lives in Florida with a highly competent government. So, for example, 2 years ago, we had Hurricane Ian, basically a Category 5 that hit Southwest Florida, demolished Fort Myers, Sanibel, Captiva, some of the barrier islands there. Immediately after the hurricane, everybody on the news was saying to rebuild the Sanibel Causeway, which is about 4 miles, was going to take 3 years. That's what everybody was saying. DeSantis basically had it rebuilt in a month because he brought in the right people. He cut regulation. I actually met one of the contractors at DeSantis's reelection night. A guy came up to me, said that he was one of the contractors that worked on it. And he said, Dave, I just want to tell you that this guy, he basically brought all the best contractors down. He took everybody to the bridge and basically said, what do we need to do? We gave him our recommendations and he started making it happen the next day. That's proper, competent governance. We're just so not used to that. We're used to what you fled in California, an ever-growing state that taxes endlessly and punishes people for success. And then it's like, how is it that I have nice, clean roads in Florida? How is it that we don't have homeless people? We don't have no homeless people, but why do things work with no income tax in Florida? And why does Cali tax the high hell out of you and have much worse services and much worse infrastructure and a whole series of other problems? So I would say as little as the government can do is what I want it to do.
What about leaving it to the private sector?
I would leave as much as possible to the private sector. I mean, this is where, okay, so should there be some regulations around environment, let's say, because you don't want every company dumping sewage into the river. That's like the base one that most people would ask about. Yeah, I think you can have some basic regulations around that. But most things, see, the thing is, capitalism, the beauty of capitalism is that someone's always trying to make a better mousetrap. So if you're a company that it is exposed to be doing horrible things, and this is also the beauty of the internet, by the way, because now we can expose things a lot quicker because we all have phones and we all have cameras and all of these things. It's like if you're a company and whatever you're making glasses, and it turns out that actually you're dumping a ton of toxic sludge into the water or into whatever, into the fields behind you, and there's schools there. It's like that will now be exposed very quickly, and there will be more competition for that.
Because I remember a while ago, there's that big oil spill. I think it was like 2008 or 2009.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody who was like, oh, that company had that big oil spill, but they're 5 cents cheaper. I'm not going to go there.
Sure,
they just look at the price. You're like, all right, well, it's cheaper. That oil spill, I didn't see it.
Right.
You know,
well,
it's
always tricky to get people to care about things that aren't happening in their backyard.
Yes.
Right. Right. When it happens in your backyard, then it's like not in my backyard. And then suddenly you're screaming about it. But if it happens miles away, you don't realize all the reasons that it will potentially affect you or anything else. I think the world's changing. I think the world is changing in massive ways. And it's deep. It's definitely connected to what we're talking about with Twitter and YouTube and everything else. It's like, the media used to just control that Overton window in such a tight way that the stories that we would see were so slim in nature and leaving out so much. And now it's like, if there's an oil spill and something really terrible is happening, it's going to be covered in new media in a completely new way, and it will get out there more. Can you force people to care about it enough so that there are different regulations? Maybe, but the Exxon Valdez was a horrific oil spill. We have regulations against oil spills. The captain, I think, was drunk and fell asleep. Like, there's no system that's perfect. So I would personally just be reining in all of that. Yeah. And then you have to hope that enough good competition is out there so that companies will do better.